I'm so excited to welcome you to this special webinar. My name is Natalia Damato, and I'm the head of school at one of Vivvi's campuses here in the Upper East Side. I've been with Vivvi a long time, and I'm so excited to join all of you on this webinar. I'm also thrilled to welcome Jennie Monness here with us. She is an early childhood educator. She has nearly 2 decades of experience working with children and their families. She is the co-founder with Union Square Play, which if you live in New York City, you've probably dropped by at some point to one of her classes with your little one. And she is also the co-founder of Charmspring, which has developed an amazing tool called Springboard. Springboard is a visual routine board that is designed specifically for children, which fosters independence, which allows for smoother transitions during the day and better days, honestly, for the whole family. If you're interested in learning more about Charmspring, we'll drop a link in the chat. And Jennie was gracious enough to share a code for us so you can access her materials. I'm definitely going to let Jennie hop in a moment and introduce herself. But for those of you who are not familiar with Vivvi, I did want to share a little bit of information about what we do. So Vivvi is on a mission to really reinvent what childcare looks like, making it a special experience, not only for the children, but for the whole entire family. We have 11 campuses in New York City and Westchester, and we specialize in early learning and care for children as young as 6 weeks, and children can stay with us until they're 5 years old. Vivvi partners with a variety of employers of all sizes to bring childcare and early learning to parents as part of their workplace benefit, which is great. And again, as I said, something that I think truly sets us aside is that we really are interested in supporting the entire family. So not just educating and caring for the child, but partnering with parents, sharing education and resources for parents who are on the really early years of their parenting journey. And so hosting this conversation today is part of some of those resources. And we're thrilled to have you. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about how the webinar will run. So we have some logistical information before we dive in. We're so happy to have all of you here today. And we have about 45 minutes together. Jennie is going to use the first 20 minutes or so to really run through her strategies and tips. We have reviewed the questions you submitted prior to the webinar, so we'll definitely take time to review those. But our chat function is open. So feel free to use the chat box if something comes to mind or you would like to add to the conversation. We're going to try and get to as many of those questions as possible. This is a big topic. And so we want to make sure that we're responding to as many of you as possible. So feel free to use the chat box. We'll also be sharing a recording of this webinar. So you can feel free to review. With that being said, let's dig right in. Jennie, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share a bit about your background.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalia. And thank you to everyone who's joining and who will be watching this. As Natalia mentioned, I've worked with infants, toddlers, and young children for many years. And I'm now a parent myself to a 5- and 7-year-old. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about routines, which I feel very passionately about and have led to, Charmspring and partnering with, amazing co-founders to create the Springboard. And I'm really eager to share many tools with you guys today and for you all to leave this webinar feeling like you can take on a lot of those really difficult moments that we have and experience with our children and how routines can really unlock so much for you. As a teacher and director and entrepreneur and human, and someone honestly who, you know, has, had to grow into building lots of executive functioning tools, routines have really helped me, just as a human, connecting with kids, and now as a mom. So yeah, let's get started because, as Natalia said, it's a very big topic and we have lots of questions, which is a great sign that everyone's interested in it. So yeah, we named this I Can Do It because that's really what I believe routines do for children. It empowers them into believing that they can do a lot more than I think both grown-ups and kids kind of think they can. And I think routines help to bring that to the surface. So let's dive into sort of what I feel are the pillars of routines, which is giving predictability and how that allows children to feel safer. I love using the lens of us to kind of hone in on certain points because I think it really helps you to remember it. If you think about predictability for us and how that even gives us safety, think about what it might feel like without having your Google Calendar, or when you forget to tell your spouse about a dinner or they forget to tell you. That doesn't feel safe, honestly. If you look at the core of it, when you forget to put something in your Google Calendar or can't access it or whatever tool you use, it feels unsafe inside our body because we can't predict basically or know to expect it. And there's sort of that, caught off guard nature that we try to avoid when we're building routines. Repetition, again, if you're using the lens of us to help remember this, think of the things that become sort of rituals for you that really gives you a sense of security. When you don't have that, it's like, when am I going to fit this in? When, it has to become really a ritual and routine, and that comes with repetition. And then independence. It's harder to kind of lean into this as a grown up. It's like I don't want to be so independent all the time, but we do get such a sense of confidence when we're able to do things on our own and sort of becoming unfrozen with certain things. And that might mean asking for help and getting support. And that's what I think routines do for children. It allows them to feel supported and it builds confidence and a way of feeling like I can do it. So let's get a little bit further into that. And please, Natalia, like flag me if anything is unstable. I'm at my husband's office, but it follows me everywhere.
Will do.
So just like, okay, so far so good, right? Okay, great. Uh, uh, so why routines are as editors? Let's start with predictability. For me, what this kind of hones in on is, you know, giving children I know what comes next feeling. In order to learn and embrace their day, as I mentioned before, they have to feel safe. And in order to feel safe, things have to be less abstract for them. Otherwise, they're left wondering, when things will be met. Like, it doesn't even need to be like, when will I eat? I think children start to learn that you know, they can rely on certain meals and things happening in their day. But I think it's also building routine around, like, when am I going to see my grown up? When am I going to get to play? When am I going to have free time? Um, and that makes them more open to embracing the more structured times and transitions and the things that feel a little bit less kind of, empowering in their day, or connecting in their day. Um, and it alleviates, uncertainty for them. And so I think since time is so abstract for children, we really need to kind of think of how we can make things more accessible and concrete for them. And that comes with routines. Of course, visual routines, like the springboard, are really amazing for that reason. But even without that, thinking about how can I make things feel less kind of foreign to my child and sort of connecting things. Like we know after we wake up that we do X, Y, and Z, being able to show that is even more effective. But instead of like in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it's a little bit more tangible for them when we can kind of um, help them make sense of what time actually means. And that unlocks the safety feature or security. Let's think about a little bit when our kids are resisting. And that often comes with like an inflexibility. So a lot of people will think, oh, wait, we can go to, I think that, yeah, you can go. Yes, sorry. Yeah, why? Yes, too much structure make my child inflexible. They don't want to lean so much into routines and feel as though they're cornering their child into needing so much structure, but it actually does the opposite. It allows them to be more adaptable because they feel more in the know, which allows them to kind of take on those surprise times with a lot more openness. It's when they don't have sort of this groundwork of a routine that they're more resistant to things that kind of divert them from their usual routine. Something like a birthday party, a holiday, a day off from school, a new activity, all those things become easier for a child to kind of take on when they have this groundwork or framework of a routine to come back to. And yeah, sort of this solid foundation. So the structure actually unlocks more flexibility in that way. We can move on to the next one. So I think that we've all heard the phrase from kids of, no, I can do it myself. And we think of that often in a way that feels like they're resisting. But it's a sign that children really crave that independence, that they really want to do things themselves. We can't always allow them to do everything themselves, but having these predictable kind of allows them to feel more independent because there's less demands from us, right? And usually children will be like, I can do it myself when we're demanding or not giving them opportunity or open times in their day for them to really build independence. So when we break down these like bigger transitions in their day, like a morning, let's use as an example into these familiar steps, it's really effective because it breaks down a big endeavor of I need to get from wake up to school, let's say. And I think that even feels daunting for grown-ups too. Like I need to get from wake up to work or to dropping my kid off. But when you break that down, like picture how lovely it would be if we had sort of a visual of like all the steps it would need to take. We don't have that. So picture how much more overwhelming that is for a child. And so we all kind of get into this rut of like, not shouting demands, but giving our kids demands, and they resist because they want to feel more, part of that process. And we'll get into tools and how we can kind of break that down for them. But, you know, building independence comes from routines, allowing, our children to participate in their routine by having a routine to follow, basically. Otherwise, they don't know where they're going to be able to participate more or less, and they don't even know where to start. So that's why, this kind of framework unlocks more opportunity for independence and in turn builds the confidence that comes with that. And then again, before we are diving into like tools next, but just wanted to say that it helps get everyone on the same page. I think it's not just about your child and you, it's about the siblings in the family. If you have a partner, it really gets everyone on the same page when everyone knows of this routine. Yeah, because I think everyone becomes a little bit more resistant and lost when there's not really this routine that, kind of breaks things down into more detailed steps. Um, yeah, there's less nagging, there's less power struggles and more opportunity to problem solve when there is, the inevitable resistance and tantrum. You can kind of work as a team. It doesn't feel like you against them. Okay, I'm following along on my own version, so that's why it's like a little bit of a delay. So let's get into, I've said before how routines can really unlock magic, and you might think routines maybe are more appropriate for children of a certain age. And the truth is that it can unlock that magic that comes with independence and safety, security, all those things in like sort of those pillars that we started with at any age. Truly, even babies, it obviously looks a lot different. And I want us to really think about routines not as strict schedules, which can kind of do the opposite when they're so prescriptive and they don't really, do what we want them to do, which is to kind of give these open opportunities for children to participate and to navigate when like tricky transitions or curveballs come. So if you think of even a baby, you know, them understanding or seeing, what comes along with me being laid down on the changing table isn't just that I'm shocked from my play and picked up and put on the changing table and just laying here, but that my grown up will let me know beforehand, it's time to change your diaper, put me on the changing table, might hand me a diaper. And so that's like what independence kind of looks like when you're thinking of a really young baby. But as they get older, it can look something like, you know, it's time to go from breakfast to getting dressed. Now's a time when I can show my grown up that I know that that takes brushing my teeth, washing my hands, using the, whatever it is in your routine. And then things even older as packing my backpack because I know what day I need to hand in my homework. All of these things kind of like ease the day and transitions because no one's surprised and actually everyone's more involved. And then they're also routines are social emotional learning building blocks because they do what we said before, which is build confidence and independence, but they also help with impulse control, which we really don't fully kind of develop to our full potential with until we're like 25, and self-regulation. That, these are like sort of the ground building blocks that we need in order to get to that full potential of impulse control and self-regulation. And we'll get into a little bit more how that works. But this is really the magic of all of it here.
Jenny, you're sharing such excellent points. Your internet is a little bit unstable, so there is some freezing. Jess is saying maybe try to turn off your video and just try audio
Oh,
for a
and turn
little
it back
bit.
on.
Yeah, or just see if that kind of keeps it a little bit more streaming a little bit more clearly. We
Okay.
could try that. And I was gonna just add something here because this comes up a lot as I'm welcoming new families to our campus here at Upper East Side. And you talked about this, Jenny, really the difference between schedules versus routines. Those are really two separate things that I think it's important
Yes.
for, as we continue these conversations, there is a difference. And so Jenny gave the wonderful example with like young infants and toddlers. It's not so much that the child's schedule is at 10 a.m. we do this, at 10:30 we do this, and at 11, because these children aren't telling time. It's more of first we do this, then we do that. So it's how they really make sense of the day. So it's not so much about putting, I just want to be clear, schedules aren't as helpful for this age group because they're not telling time or watches, but it's that predictability of first and then that, which really I think sets up children, even as infants, right? Some babies eat and then sleep and then play. Some babies eat, play, and then sleep. And so whatever those predictable routines are, are really supportive of them making sense of the world. And again, as they get older, feeling really empowered that they know first something's going to happen and then the second thing's going to happen.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The schedule is actually, if you try to do that, can do the opposite and create more of this uneasy feeling. Is my internet better now? I closed some things.
It seems good now.
Or no?
I'll let
Natalia,
it seems okay for now.
just
Yeah,
let me
I'll let
know.
you know and then we could do the video off thing.
Okay. We can move on to the next slide, which is creating empowering routines. Let's get into kind of, yes. So something that I love is the power of previewing. Again, routines, as Natalia said, aren't schedules. So the power of being able to kind of go through what your child can expect is really so powerful, is so effective. Even if it's like kneeling down before walking into a party and going over what your child can expect, that is wildly huge in terms of your child not feeling like they have to experience any curveballs, which usually is what comes with sort of this resistance. They go into a new place, like a birthday party or whatever setting it is, and it's like, I don't have a routine because I have no idea what's about to happen. I'm not familiar with this place. So that's kind of what previewing is. And you can use that when it's not big, different things in the routine, like just waking up in the morning. It can be something playful, like let's go through what we can expect we need to do before we need to get out the door. And you don't have to do that every morning, but just when you're feeling like, okay, my child's in need of something to hold on to right now, that's really effective when that you can preview with them and it helps them to know what to expect. Giving choices. So obviously it needs to be age appropriate. So it's time to get dressed and go outside. You can wear these shoes or those shoes. Which do you want to choose? I think you all know how you can use that in so many different ways. If it's leaving the playground, we have to leave, in 5 minutes. Which would you want to do, the slide or the swings? Them feeling like they're given a choice allows that transition of leaving to land a lot smoother than not giving that choice right before. And then being specific, especially when you're talking about time. Again, we talked about how that's like very abstract, how waiting is hard, um, especially when they're trying to get us to participate in something. So instead of saying, 1 second or be right there, it's huge when you can say, I need to finish this call or I need to finish changing your brother's diaper, and then I'll be with you. They can really take that a lot more receptively than if we're like 1 second, which is not specific. And then being concrete, so getting in the habit of inviting your child to answer some questions about their day and not being as dependent on you as sort of like this timekeeper, um, helps make it more concrete. They don't feel like they need to ask you to make sense of things. They can begin to make it make more sense. They can begin to feel it makes more sense because yeah, you're including them and asking them. They're like, okay, I can predict some of these things. It's not just dependent on mommy or someone outside of me, which feels like not very concrete to them. And then playful practice. So this is I get into this a little bit more, but it takes so much pressure off. So, being able to anticipate, you know, specific tasks that are needed of them, um, and practicing those things, like let's put on your shoes not when we're in the morning rush and see if that will help you tomorrow when we are putting them on in the morning. And let's see if you can practice alongside your stuffed animal, something like that, just as instead of it being like, let's practice putting on your shoes because I need you to be able to do something in the morning. Let's play and put on your shoes, put your shoes on your dolls or your Barbies, And then in the morning, when it comes time to needing them to, it feels less like a chore and more like, oh, I could do this. Okay, let's go into the tools now for those like really daunting times of day, which are usually the morning rush, bedtime, which I say bedtime blues because it's usually around your child just feeling a little bit sad about saying goodbye for the day. And then all the times where we are experiencing our child's having those power struggles, which are usually during transitions or when we see tantrums, things like that. So understanding why kids resist at these times, like I said, I called it the bedtime blues. It's more to remind myself when I'm in the thick of like bedtime and they're resisting, like this is them really not wanting to say goodbye to me for the night. It's them wanting more control and connection. I know that transitions are tiny separations. Like I said, bedtime is a goodbye. Often people don't realize that. And then confidence comes from them contributing. So like we said before, just really giving them opportunity to their own day.
Jenny,
So some tools for the,
Jenny, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. You're going a little bit in and out again.
okay, so I'll turn off my video.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think that might help.
great. Okay. So for the, I called it the morning mood. It's about like kind of setting that mood when they wake up. I think of it as a time of building confidence and ownership, but what that means for, really tangible tools is thinking about how you can begin the day with moments of connecting before directing. So there's so many times where I wake up and I know I have so much to do, and my kids come in and I'm like, oh, I needed a little bit more time. And I'm so quick to reflexively want to be like, it's time for breakfast. Like daddy's upstairs waiting for you. That's already directing them before connecting. And it is so much smoother when I just take a minute to kneel down, say, good morning. I missed you last night. Just a little moment before I say, daddy's upstairs with breakfast. That's really something that I want to start with for morning because I think it could change the entire trajectory of the day, and making that part of your own routine for your kids. And then again, laying out, I'm looking at people in the chat, sorry.
Oh, sorry,
Laying,
Jenny. That was
no, no,
me.
no.
I love that idea of connecting before directing. I often wake up on speed, ready to go. And
Oh,
that's such a
yeah.
lovely idea.
Yes. And then laying out predictable steps. So I've talked a lot about that already, but just remembering that in the morning can diffuse a lot of that like morning hectic rush feeling. Remembering how powerful involvement is. The more they do, the more they feel they can do. And that's such a great feeling to kind of start their day with. And then we talked about, connecting before directing, but also shifting from demanding to supporting. It can quickly and easily start to feel to a child that we're demanding things. Think about supporting them. Instead of put on your shoes, why haven't you put on your shoes? What can I do to help you put your shoes on now? Of course, this is at a point when like they haven't put on their shoes, right? I don't believe you need to say that about everything, but if you've like asked a few times or you've laid out, the previewing, you've done all the things, instead of immediately going to demand mode, think of this as like, how can I support? And we're doing a ton of things. I don't mean like stop your whole routine, but simply saying to them, how can I help you? Or what can you do to get from my bathroom right now to your shoes? It can just go a long way and takes the demanding kind of reflex out of it. And then taking out unnecessary no's and transitions. So I was with someone yesterday and we talked about how powerful it is when we start to think about, do I really have to say no? And kids really quickly start to feel the repetitive nature of us reflexively saying no. Of course, no, there's no ice cream in the morning. But if it's like, can I put on a cartwheel before can I do a cartwheel before I put on my shoes? I'm thinking of my 7-year-old. I very much want to say no, especially if like she's saying that. I know it's because I've like, anyway, I'll be like, sure. And she'll do the cartwheel and put on her shoes. And then taking out unnecessary transitions. Again, this was in conversation yesterday that someone said that their routine is once the kids, she lives in Connecticut in a house, and she was like, once my kids come downstairs, they don't go back upstairs again. That's her routine. And what that looks like for you is different. I personally feel like I couldn't do that because I want my kids to brush their teeth after they eat. She's like, we brush the teeth before. Anyway, just thinking about even the physical transition of going up, down, or from the room to out of the room to in the room, we can take out some of that and build that into the routine. It can actually be a fun game. Like, once you leave your room, we don't go back in. Like, what are all the things we need to make sure you get, as they get older? And I think helps with the, all the stuff that comes with transitions and moving from place to place. Next one is the transitions. Oh, we're 2 slides behind. Sorry. If you can go from morning mood, which I just talked about, and then go to the next one. Yes. So the overall with transitions and tantrums is thinking about how to create more calm and invite cooperation. We've talked a lot about cooperation so far, and how routines can help kids feel safe during the in-between moments. But let's lean into cues as tools that you could take home with you today, because tantrums are often a result of kids feeling off guard, which I touched on, that, you know, when a child, let's say, is playing and we're like, it's time to go, we got to go, that will very easily kind of invite a tantrum because they were caught off guard. So giving cues like 3 more minutes left to play. Obviously, I was a teacher. Natalia, you're probably like, yeah, we do that at Vivvi, and that might feel uncomfortable to you. You can put it on a Tony box and record something or someone saying it. Alexa, I'm sure, has some sort of song. Like there's so many ways that you can access cues. Um, Visual routine boards help to give those cues because you're like, okay, you can play, but these are the things that are going to come after play. So yeah, cues go a long way. When your child is in a tantrum, I think having a routine for yourself in ahead of time helps. I'm giving the example here of co-regulation. So there are so many times where I feel in my body when my kids are having a tantrum or a hard time, an inability to regulate. And then I remember the routine of co-regulation. For us, for a long time, it looked like me just saying to my child, one of them in particular, this worked for, let's touch noses. And that was our routine. And I can't tell you how much it helped. My other child would never do that. And she'd be like, no, I don't want to touch your nose. And so just think about what might work for you. But that was huge for us, and definitely a routine that I could lean into and remember. And that leads to like an emotional anchor. Like, what are those anchors that give sort of this emotional regulation capacity? So for tantrums, touching noses, before we talked about the cleanup songs, but even when you're saying goodbye, I have one child who really has a hard time saying goodbye, and things like having our special goodbye, like she likes to do a special handshake. My other child, if I'm saying goodbye to her she's at home and I'm going out for dinner for the night, she likes to give me something that I keep in my pocket. That's our routine, and like sort of this emotional anchor that helps sort of diffuse like, the sadness that comes with saying goodbye. She's like, okay, I'm giving you this, mom, and we can still feel connected. So yeah, thinking of what an emotional anchor could look like for you and building that into routine during those hard times. And then bedtime routines. Yes, thank you. I said a few times that bedtime is a goodbye. So I like to think of it as a time for connection. And then of course, consistency. We all know how hard it is to be consistent with bedtime, but there are ways that it can feel a little bit more tangible to do when you're also evoking calm for yourself. Something huge for us was building in a consistent wind down in our routine. Um, my kids actually have the adult hatch light. If you're not familiar with it, this is not a plug, but it's this really calming, not kid song, way of timing that at 7 p.m. it automatically goes on with this red light and it evokes calm. So that's our wind down routine. We love the calming songs that come on. We help choose them together. And then we know that familiarity helps reduce the power struggles. So and supports the self-regulation. So yeah, just keeping that I only listed here so that it motivates you to kind of keep a bedtime routine. For me, it's helped a lot because there's often times where I'm like, do I have to say no? Like we can go a little bit off schedule, which you absolutely can do, but that in turn can take away the familiarity and that groundwork that we really know kids need, especially at bedtime when it's like tough to say goodbye for the night. I talked about wind down rituals, but also calming rituals. One of my kids, right before right before like it's like everyone, that they're ready to close their eyes, just gets this like burst of energy that she needs to let out. And instead of fighting her on that, we built in like a calming ritual for her. So she's allowed to like jump on her little couch 5 times and then come back into bed. And then something that will never be wrong is ending the day with a little bit of humor because it automatically connects you with your kids. One of the things that I do is I'll brag to the loveys. One is an avocado my girl sleeps with. The other is a little bunny lovey. I'll be like, Avi, I need to tell you one thing about what Tess did today. And they laugh and it connects us. And it diffuses all I don't want to go to bed. They get excited for that. I know I'm throwing a lot out. So the next 2 slides are really about the springboard and how much it's unlocked for me. These are versions of DIY virtual board, routines that my co-founders and I have created throughout the years and what led to the springboard. So I just want to say that we know that you can do it if you can, and then see that like you'll probably want something that can grow with you and your child. And that's really why we developed the springboard, because we know it's hard for parents to make something themselves and for kids to really take that in as something that's like this established part of their home and family and household. It's on a piece of paper. It can feel like it's taken less seriously. So yeah, that was just a little plug for why I believe so much in the springboard, besides all the other things I talked about. But what I'm most excited about now is answering questions, and I hope we have, yeah, a way of answering them all, so we can dive in.
Thanks so much, Jennie. Those were great tips. I just wanted to add to the conversation, so many times when parents are joining our program or observing in the classroom, they're like, how do you get all of the toddlers to fall asleep on their own during nap time? Or how is everyone, you know, cleaning up all of the blocks and joining as a group during circle time? And it really is the mix of those things, the predictability and familiarity of the routines, but also the visual that partners with that. And so if you are in one of the Vivvi classrooms here, you would see something that is very similar to the springboard in terms of like visual schedules with photos for the children, because they're not quite reading yet in our age group, but also words for the grown-ups that are in the space, whether that's the teachers, parents, or substitute teachers, of what's happening first and what's happening next. It really, really helps children make sense of the day, feel empowered in the space, and have less surprises, which I think helps the day run more smoothly.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Every classroom in the universe has some sort of way of showing children what's going to be part of their day. And yeah, it was one of the reasons why my partners and I like implemented that as parents, because one is an educator and one learned from her close friend what that would unlock. So yes, Natalia, firsthand that what that does in a classroom, especially 25 kids who should go to take a nap. Yeah, that's feel impossible for a parent, but it's because you build that into the routine. They know,
Mhm.
okay, this is time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to dive into a couple of questions. Again, the chat box is open. So if anyone, attending live has something they'd like us to touch on, feel free to enter in the chat box. So a question here was submitted just ahead of the webinar. Giving my child more independence makes me nervous. I see moms on Instagram letting their kids cook with them with a sharp knife, and I'm even nervous to let my kid climb on the playground by himself. How can I create independence without compromising safety? Which this question I definitely relate to. I have two young daughters, and I'm definitely safety mom oriented, with thinking about them not hurting themselves and things like that. So I definitely connect to this question. Jennie, did you want to talk a little bit about independence and then?
Yes, absolutely. I'll go off just to make sure about connection. Yes, this is actually was something that I feel I struggled with my spouse. So he calls himself the safety police, and I am someone that is probably more radically open to risky play, and those people you've seen on Instagram giving their kids, the Montessori setting of like cutting and all that. I want to just say to give yourself grace that you don't have to be one or the other. So there are so many ways to get closer to being more open to independence without becoming that person that you see on Instagram. And I said that to my husband too. Like if you let go a little bit about as soon as we've hit the sidewalk, you're telling them to be careful. Sorry, I had something beep over here. Instead of immediately reflexively saying be careful just because we've exited a building, it doesn't mean you're giving in to them running into the streets. And I think that's like an important thing to clarify for yourself. And it was for him too, that he felt he was like holding on to such safety because he felt like if he didn't, they would become on the other end of the spectrum, which he couldn't handle. Probably because he thought that because he's married to me, like sort of someone that would allow them not to run into the streets, let me be clear, but that is a little bit more open to, letting them scooter a little bit in front of us. And that has come with years of seeing what independence does for children. And I will say something to motivate you a little bit is that even if it's tiny baby steps, the more you allow for opportunity for independence, not only does it unlock all the things that we've talked about that can come with that, but it builds such confidence in them, of course, but in of what you have in them. It builds trust in them and more confidence that you permeate that you have in your kid, which is so monumentally valuable for them as they get older. So even if it's at first, I'm going to give them a dull Play-Doh knife to practice on with Play-Doh. And you don't even have to say this is practice, but just I'm giving an example of the example that you gave with the Montessori mom. And you don't ever have to give them a knife for until they're much like start with something, where the stakes are a little bit less high.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Jennie. I think, showing that you can kind of trust them, reiterating what's going to happen first, thinking about the children leaving the building, definitely here in Manhattan can be nerve-wracking, but letting them know first, we're going to be going outside on the sidewalk. It's important if you want to walk that you're 3 steps, in front of mom, or that you stay next to me and hold the stroller. Whatever kind of those
Yeah.
guidelines are prior to those transitions can really be helpful. Then you're kind of avoiding the directing in the moment where your kiddo may want to take off running or not
Yeah.
follow um, some of those safety guidelines that you feel more comfortable with. I will say, as a mom of two little ones, cooking the kids are always fascinated with cooking in the kitchen. And so my husband and I found ourselves trying to distract them when all they wanted to do was be with one of us in the kitchen. And so finding jobs that are really toddler safe or get safe for young child, even not using knives, like tearing lettuce for a salad or folding napkins to set the table is a great way to
Yes.
include them and have them be part of the process of cooking or getting ready for mealtime, where you're not kind of pushing your nerves by letting them, close to the stove or use a knife or a kitchen tool, things like that.
Yes, absolutely. Independence doesn't have to feel risky, especially
Yeah.
at birth. Yes.
Um, there is another question here. How can I build routines and daily structure for an 8-month-old? How young is too young for a child to understand and develop routines? Does it depend on the routine?
I love this question so much because I've spent so much time working with their infants in like even like a classroom setting and seeing how much more they're capable of understanding stable, because I think it will really help you to know that there's potential for a baby to understand when you're in, and Vivvi probably has infant classrooms, when you're in a classroom with 8 babies and there's 2 teachers and you don't have a routine, you see that that feels a lot less manageable. However, when there is a routine, like the babies know that this teacher changes Sienna's diaper, and of course, we change diapers all the time, let me be clear, but changes Sienna's diaper, then Paul's diaper, and then I know it's my turn to change my diaper. They know that. And I saw how when we were able to build it, or that I know that, I get my bottle after Sienna. And so I knew that going into parenthood because I saw that in a classroom, how children were able to, even at 6 months old, observe that when we were consistent. I then knew the power of routine with my own children. So I knew that it was worth it to go down when they were laying in their bouncer or whatever and say, I'm going to change your diaper now. I knew that that was very powerful because even though they didn't understand my words, they knew that after I like used that tone or whatever it was, or maybe brought a diaper with me to say it, that they were more attuned to what was coming next. So I think for an 8-month-old, it's not about scheduled like bottles and diapers and things like that, but it's about including them, even when they are that young, truly. Even if it's like taking their hand to touch a wipe while they're on the changing table, they're more attuned to what's happening to them. And as we talked about in this workshop, that a lot of resistance comes at any age from not knowing what to expect. So yes, the short answer is routines look a lot different for babies. It is very hard to have any semblance of a routine, but I would say including them, talking to them, narrating, and giving them cues with your body, with voice, all of that is what I would lean into as what routine is at that age. And last thing is that when you're looking at visuals, that you are absolutely able to, even if you don't have a springboard, when they get up in the morning, bring them to the window and say, it's morning. Look out the window. They start to like get those cues of, babies don't understand like when is it night? When is it nap? So I think there's ways of connecting the dots with joint attention objects like, a window. We're both looking at the window and I'm using language. And now you'll connect the dots that every time we go to the window, I only do that in the morning. So there's ways of using visuals to kind of make sense of a routine.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. There was another question submitted. The parent is saying, I want my child to be more independent, but when she does things herself, it takes forever. How do I balance getting where we need to go and giving her the space to try things on her own? Is it okay to sometimes let her do things herself and other times say no? Like, I'm going to do it for you today. What do you think about that?
Yes, I first want to just say solidarity. And that I just want to also say that you even like realizing that is huge, that it feels just like, I want to empower her, but like we live in the real world. So I would reframe a little bit that it's not ever saying no or I'm going to do it for you. It's more, I know that you can do that. I know you can put on these shoes. I've seen it. But today I'm going to help you, not do it for you. I'm going to help you. I think leaning into that feels less like you're taking away something for them from them, both for you and your child, and that you're supporting a little bit more so that we can get to where we need to be. You can even say, I know you can put on these shoes, but I also know that sometimes it's tricky and sometimes we have to get somewhere. And that's one of those times, like we have to get to school. So I'm going to help you a little bit more right now.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, Jenny. And I find myself in similar situations where I really want to allow my daughters to be so independent, but watching the my watch and kind of breaking a sweat. I think something I've seen success with too as a mom is just kind of owning what's happening and being a little bit silly with my daughters, like telling them, "Oh my goodness, girls, we're running late. We don't have much time. We have to be very, very quick. Since we're in such a rush, I'm going to help you today
Yes.
with your shoes." And I think just including them in the conversation
Yes.
feels very different than just taking that control that, we have as parents, just saying, I'm going to do this for you,
Right.
kind of owning what's happening and being, very strategic. My husband struggles with putting shoes on, my youngest daughter. And so on certain days, she'll wear Velcro shoes or, ones she can slip on, that are easier. So just, again, adding that strategy, it's easier for us as adults to plan the shoes for it to go smoother than to sometimes have those power struggles when you're trying to get out the door.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Routine of planning ahead. Yes.
I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, and I saw a question come up in the chat about bedtime, and there were a couple of questions submitted around bedtime. One of the parents asks, they have a 2.5-year-old. He doesn't ever want to miss out on the action. They feel like they do have a bedtime routine that's 7 steps, including reading books, taking a bath, cleaning up. But it just doesn't go well. There's still a lot of resistance. What kind of tips would you share, Jenny?
So I will say that, well, one, I think you might have this routine of 7 steps, but it might be a time to visually lay that out. Can you just say again and tell you how old the child is?
2.5.
Right. Even though I think this will help for anyone, but I think, all ages, I think, you know, often when they think of, okay, I have these 7 steps, it's sort of like when kids start to resist parts of those steps, it's like they know they're getting closer to bedtime. We think routine is just the solve, but it's also building in, like we said before, like what will help them get to the next steps in the routine. So you've nailed down, it sounds like, the predictability. Like it doesn't sound like there's any surprises because you said you have this 7-step thing, like he knows what to expect. It doesn't just take away, all the resistance because one is you want to take away like things that are abstract. So that's why I think visuals help a little bit, like with that part. But then what I'm trying to get at is, are you building in a little bit of connection in between? And that does not need to look like you have to micromanage every part. You have to give tons of reminders, although the visuals will allow for you to not have to give as many reminders. But are you incorporating a little bit of what we talked about, like these moments of connection? Or, not demands, but supports, things like that, I think can help move it along a lot easier. And I know this question probably came in before we talked about the bedtime stuff, but if you can go back to, because you'll get this recording, some of those things in that slide, I think it might make things feel a lot smoother, and unlock the power of the routine that it sounds like you've really, you know, been great at implementing.
Yeah, the tips you shared earlier, Jenny, I think are incredibly supportive of the bedtime routine. I do think oftentimes with young children, those moments of connection can be really supportive. I think sometimes when we're guiding children in the classroom, 7 steps doesn't seem like a lot to us, but could
Right.
be a lot for them. And so really honing in on those parts of the bedtime routine that could be challenging, right? Is it the separation of like the parent leaving the room? Maybe that part of the routine needs to be broken down a little bit more as opposed to the 7 steps, because some of the steps are really smooth. So
Yeah.
that may be something to look at. And then really the visuals.
Yeah.
I can't say as a mom is so helpful. I have the one book more kiddo in my house where it's one more story, one more book. So on our visual at home, there's 2 books. And so as we're going, we're gonna pick 2 books and I'm showing the visual. After we read the first book, I say we have one more left. What is your last
Yeah.
choice? And then again, the last book. Of course, sometimes, she will push again, but I'll say, look, we picked our 2. And so really having those visuals, I think, to partner with some of those parts of the routine can really, really
Yeah.
be helpful for young children.
Absolutely. Yeah. And make 7 steps feel a lot more possible, by seeing it rather than just in their heads. Yeah.
So, well, I can't thank you enough, Jennie, for joining us here this afternoon and sharing these wonderful tips with us. This has been great. Just added a link in the chat box for those who are interested in learning more about Charmspring and learning more about the Springboard. I definitely think as a teacher and as a mom, this is something that could be really supportive for routines and transitions at home. We will be sending a recording out of this webinar, but I would like to thank everyone for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you all so much.